What's up, fellow lords of gaming, and welcome back to the channel. So we're jumping in, taking a look at Dune Awakening and its most recent release and everything that it screwed up. So let's jump right on in, guys. So number one, on July 7th, we did get an update. 1.1.15 was released, and they basically made changes to the deep desert, the end game, and the land strat. So let's review what they attempted to do before we jump into what it caused. So number one, they made tier 6 resources collectible across the entirety of the PvE desert. Great, cool. We're doing something for PvE players. Essentially, you recognize that the problem is that you made them accessible inside the deep desert. You're not breaking away from this idea that the PvP zone and the PvE zone, where you basically have PvE, PvP, and you're trying to find these different solutions, they're just not going to work. At some point, you're going to have to come to the realization that you're going to have timed PvP events and flaggable PvP instances. That would solve the large lion's share of the griefing and the mechanics that's going into that, but we refuse to get to that, so we'll have to see where it goes from here. Next up, they added elements of randomization to the respawn timers for unique loot containers in the deep desert. So previously you knew those respawn timers were like at 45 minutes, but that means that people can just camp out those specific areas, and you're still inviting the problems. There's so little space for so many players to basically engage in, and people are going to trample over each other in order to get those zones, or they're going to do what some people started noticing, was we're going to hoard those resource materials and try to gate block them and things like that, and it's just going to be bad because the PvE players are no better than the PvP players. You're just not creating lanes for them to swim in and allowing them to just be like sharks in the water to each other. The Platinum tier crafting components, those have been split up across the entirety of the content. So Imperial testing stations, caves, shipwrecks, and then so they have their own selectable drops. Fallen ships and buried treasures can also drop some of those components. They added the chance that different selection of unique drops and PvE loot in deep desert, and they changed the spawn rate for medium and small spice fields. Essentially, the medium spice fields went from 5 to 8, and then the small spice fields went from 22 to 30. On some servers, you're essentially seeing players are basically like collectively gathering there. They're not bothering each other, so 2 or 3 people might get there, and then they just kind of like, you know, farm together, and everybody leaves with the resources that they had, and they're battling just the environment. The problem is a lot of these are just small spice field zones, and so like really you could just stay in the Haga Basin if the majority of the ones are blowing a small spice field zone. You don't create competition across the resources competing, where you have this Harkonnen faction versus Atreides faction gameplay, which we should at some point get the third faction in as well. The delay for PvP security zones, they've increased that from 5 to 30 seconds to prevent border camping. By the very nature of this damn patch inside here, you've already noted the main issue with the PvP zone inside the deep desert is that it's far easier now for PvP players to border camp a zone. It's just easier because they have less area to basically protect and cover, and so that's going to present problems at every turn. They're going to have to get to this point where they just accept you're going to have to create PvP timed events in order to create the combined arms style gameplay in the deep desert that you want, so that way you can also control the amount of time that the sandworms are going to come, so that way people are feeling enthralled to basically build a tank and go out on a battlefield, or build buggies with rocket launchers so they can go out on the battlefield. But when the worm is basically going to be there in 5, 6, 7 minutes or even shorter because you're worried about whatever zones you're creating, guess what? You're not going to get a combined arms type battle inside the PvP zone unless it's on some rock formation here or there. So you recognize that there's an issue here, but you refuse to change it. They also changed the land strat task to allow for kill and delivery contribution to happen after the task has been completed, but awarding only personal contributions. So when the faction won and many guild votes were awarded, unaffected by contributions made after the task was completed by one faction. So essentially, if you were inside the land strat, the way this worked was, you know, a task came up, the players would basically camp the zones where the House representatives were. They would get those, and then they would hoard whatever they had and then turn those in, which would lock out solo duo type PvE players who weren't participants of that. And then you have no way to compete towards this PvE in game, even in that sense. So this basically allows it now, so that way if you're a solo, duo, trio, quad, and you don't have the ability to do that, you can essentially now go in there, jump in, and continue to contribute to the LAN strat and earn yourself personal contribution for that. So that was a good thing. They also did some things where they improved the stability, and then they fixed some issues specifically to, like, you know, some of the contracts and things like that. None of this was an issue until they went in and did their implementation. And for some reason or another, they had to release a dev note to cover this because a lot of players got pissed off. It essentially amounted to some zones inside the PvE zone got tagged as PvP zones, and people's bases and all of the work that they grinded for got looted and destroyed. Now the worst part about this is it happened right before the day when the reset was going to happen and the Coriolis storm was going to come March. So players were probably already in prep to basically take all this stuff back to their bases in the Haga Basin and then come back out here the next day, and they could have did this. But they say that they went for that change and it caused those areas to happen where they were PvP enabled, and people lost their shit. And so the change was supposed to happen after the Coriolis cycle, but for some reason it happened within the ongoing cycle, and then players were just asked out, and they were feeling like they just had nothing to basically go back for. So what they're doing now is that they're not going to do a full server rollback, but what they're trying to address is how they're going to basically be able to reimburse vehicles and items back to players who were impacted by this, give them back their materials, give them back their items, their components and stuff like that. They'll show up inside the claim rewards tab by the end of this week. This is what was the reason why I did not want to do a report on this, and I waited to see what their response was, because they've been pretty responsive as a dev team, and I think that they deserve some credit for that. I don't know why we're not giving them at least that ounce of respect with as engaged as they have been for a game that's literally only been on the market for about a little bit over a month now at this point. So I waited, and I didn't want to jump on them, because I will give you the good and the bad, the ugly with these games, especially ones that I'm, you know, diehard into, and I'm still diehard into Dune Awakening, but I wanted to give them the chance to do that. So moving forward, they said they're going to they're coming to the end of what they consider the launch phase. They're primarily focused on next week about removing identified exploits, third-party cheats, client hacks, and in-game exploitations of game mechanics. We all seen, like, the duping. We've seen people basically stealing stuff from people's bases, spoofing counts and things like that. So they're gonna hit a lot of those things. So the vehicle ownership takeover, inventory dupes, and damage, insta kill attacks. They're gonna try to address all those things. The durability repair, all those things that we've been complaining about in the forums. They're gonna try to address all those things. Now, I don't know why people necessarily didn't expect for them to have a quick response to this, but, you know, like I said, I've completed the game in terms of the story mode, and I will give them credit because I'm looking at the achievement list inside there, and I'm noticing that the large number of players have not even completed that type of content. So they're really engaged in just running out to the deep deserts with their guilds, getting the items resourced there, and then they're just basically going to bore themselves out. And that's how we're going to end up with numbers drops, because like the attention spans of gnats, right? So never mind that they had an AMA within the month of launch. Never mind that they've had about 6 or 7 different patches within a month of launch, hot fixes. They've done everything they could do that you would ask a developer to do to endear themselves. Meanwhile, you've got people on the Reddit being just, I don't know if a better word to say it, but asshats. So the Funcom team has addressed the issue. I don't know how that's going to pan out, how many of the player base will be lost because of this erroneous implementation of this hot fix or patch that they put out. but is likely to take effect. I'm still having fun because I'm still in the Haga Basin. I've got 170 hours in at this point, 180 hours, almost 200 hours, I think. And I'm still having fun basically farming Duraluminum because there's nothing really inside the tier 6 materials at this point that the tier 6 materials are needed for. You're just basically grinding what you want to grind. And then if you look at it, it's like people are grinding all of this stuff, but they're still not going back to actually engage in the game. The main story of the game with the land strat system, after you've already walked down your path for the Fremen and you have to figure out there's less than 15% of the player base I finished that. That's crazy and wild. For a group of people to just be running out to the deep desert because they just want to grind out some T6 mats, you're like, you haven't even completed the damn game. Take some time, go touch grass, and then come back and complete these storylines before you complain about what's there at the end game. When all of the stuff it's just wild to me. But overall, I appreciate the FunCon team's response and their quick response, because I consider this a quick response by comparison to a lot of games that we've played. And this is a really great response in my opinion. Hopefully the reimbursement goes smoothly and players don't piggyback on just trying to ride the developers back. Guys, we are a month into this game, which is supposed to be a 10-year journey. I am literally reading Reddit and Steam community posts where people are complaining about the way the story ended. And you're like, did you not understand that this was a chapter of a 10-year saga that they want to play out? I don't get it, guys. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. Are you appreciative of what Funcom is attempting to do? I know that were you affected? Were you pissed off with what happened? I get why you are, but you know, you guys got to do better at giving some time for these developers to respond to these. Until next time, guys. Peace.